How are you guys doing? Have you already started to work on a data set? What's your first impression about it? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? What are the main challenges? Let us know everything because me and Federico are gonna try to answer all of your questions. If you have any inquiries, make sure you post them in the comments so we can afterwards in the Q&A session time just go through them and answer as many as possible. If we miss out on something, if you don't feel comfortable by asking it publicly, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You can always reach out to us also directly. You can write an email to webinars@zoomcharts.com, for example. Send in your questions. The one thing that I would just highly encourage you to do, if you do send in questions, especially if it's regarding DAX functions, please send us the PBIX file so we know exactly what you're working with. Because Federico can probably support me on this one as well, right? If you just tell me, hey, this measure isn't working, how do I fix it? It's kind of hard to tell without seeing what's happening behind the scenes.
Yes, 100%.
So send us everything. We're going to go through it so that we can understand the full picture, and that's when we can provide you with a quality answer rather than just, well, it might be one of these 15 different things, right? So just try them all out and see which one works. That's not really a great approach. All right. So Federico,
Let's say,
how
yeah,
have you been?
I know, but I'm gonna show you something in a minute, but we're working behind the scene in creating the report,
Hmm.
okay? So we can showcase our understanding of what we are looking for, okay? And it have not been easy, okay? And I'm gonna try to explain why. But I would like to say hola to Maria, hello to Nandi, and to Edwin. Welcome. Okay, we know one thing, yes? Finance. They are special. They are the Excel boys. And we need to bring this Excel thing to Power BI. Okay? Power BI doesn't behave and allow you, okay, to do the same stuff that they can do in Excel. So it's a bit further complex. Okay? So having that in mind, I say, okay, Juan Federico, you don't come from the finance background. Two, you don't understand what actually some finance people are looking for. Okay, so I decided to join a colleague of mine called Andres Jaén. Is an ambassador that come from the finance and accounting world, and we put together. Can I share it? Yeah, no.
Should be able to.
Well, can I share for me? That is kind of. Are you watching anything? No.
Not sure.
Yes. You got an screen?
Yep, we can see it. All good.
Okay. I will do that when
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
talking. But at the moment, you can say that to me now. Oh, I got confused now. Okay. I go Andres and I say, okay, Andres, let's put together a team, okay, and let's prepare something for this presentation. Okay. So everybody, you go Andres. I think Alex, can you put Andres LinkedIn connection somewhere there, the profile? So that is the task for Andres to create everything that is important from A.
Hey, there's Andreas himself.
And so Andres had to do the difficult job. My job is to make you up. I'm gonna put the list stick, okay, and I'm gonna make sure you are nicely dressed. Okay, so basically my job has been very simple, and all the merit go to Andres. So we have a little bit of an intro page, but let's go first to the data model, okay? And you can see we have inactive relationship, we have one-to-one relationship. I do believe that Andre have a massive hustle actually making everything to work and to be displayed in a way that finance people can understand properly the information we are producing. So guys, anyone want to take a screenshot and you try to copy later on, please go ahead. Okay. Any other, I have a copy for participant that want that the PBI modeled. Okay. Nothing more, just the model for you to get on with it. So our first page is the profit and loss, okay, or state of operations, okay. We got some KPIs showing the income, EBITDA. I'm not going to translate that. I think it's expected before and more and more and more. And we got the net income, okay. We got some filters to accompany, and then we have the main piece, okay, of the Canva. That is the important piece, is the matrix, okay. When you are working the matrix, you are going to realize that at least you play with the DAX, okay, a lot of values are going to be repetitive. Okay, so Andres worked the DAX that, for example, when you click in next income, it will not bring the same value that we actually can see above. So not all of them can be open. I think gross profit will not open either. And I think other income, net operating income will not open. But that is because we don't want to, or Andres did not want to these values to repeat themselves. Okay? So it is done in a way that only shows the information, the important information once, where it is, okay, and where it has to be. Again, it's Andres who know about finance and accounting. I need to trust him and tell me, Federico, this way, and this way. And Federico comply and say, yes, sir. Okay? But that matrix is what finance people are going to look at it. Okay? That's what we call the statement, the profits and loss. And then we make a couple of sunchart visuals to accompany the, the main matrix. You can change your expenses, you can change your revenue, you can change for year, you can change your quarters. As you can see, when I am using the filters, these two, I don't want them to move. They have been disconnected from the filters. I want my filter only to affect the matrix, the profit and loss. Why? Because that's what is important. I want the client to see the movement here. I don't want them to see that. That is just information. Okay? And then we just do a little bit of decoration here. We can actually bring everything back. The last refresh, something that we put there, decoration, and a simple navigation bar. When we decide to call the challenge financial statement, it's because we were expecting for you guys to go to the internet to do some research and what are the statements, okay, in a finance report. Okay, I got plenty of entries in the challenge so far. We are doing very well, but they are more just normal analysis. You have actually not provided the statement. You have done an analysis on values found in the dataset. Okay? But remember, it's financial statements. That's what they're looking for. And the reporting and analysis is basically that. But let's go to the second page. Rigoberto say hello, baby.
Yeah, patiently looking and waiting for the time. Hey, Rigoberto.
So we are now, again, another important thing, again, is the matrix. Okay, we are seeing now budget be actuals. Okay, another important part of an statement in accounting and finance. Okay, I have everything like that because that is me. Let's use all the space. Andres and no Federico, the client want to see 1 year, whether it's the last or the first. Okay, and when they see that year, they might want to compare it if they want to. Okay, but we provided to them close, no super close, with one open. Andres prepared this. The measures they are made with SVG. Okay, and let me show you some of the Andres work. That is an SVG measure. Yeah, guys, I got headaches too. I understand that. Okay, but Andres didn't. Andres enjoyed doing that. I can. I was talking to him every morning about 5 o'clock in the morning a.m. and he was already smiling because he Federico, look what I did. And I said, what the hell is that? That is that. Okay, again, plenty of videos to USBG. Yes, Andre is keeping it simple. Yes, for me, I had to go this morning to say, how do you change that color here, please? And he changed it for me. So, but that again, we have expenses and revenue. You can check by month, although as you can see, it lost quite a lot. You can expand per year. You can go up the other way around. You check 24 and 23. That is something that I created. It's fixed. It doesn't come actually 100% from the data set, but that is a small note telling someone, hey, Q3, blah, 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 giving them some information that can be made dynamic. And then we have an slicer with the years. Okay, that is only affecting these two, is there for these two. That doesn't have nothing to do with this. And give us some more information. And then we have revenues and expenses and COG, cost of goods sold, and income. Again, guys, that is the piece of information. That is what people want to see. It's a hassle to filter that, to sort that out. Okay? So again, guys, it's not about this, it's not about that, it's about this table. And then now we have our profits and loss, we have our budget and actuals, and now we are gonna check our customers or any other stuff we have in the data set, okay, to go deeper, or more granular into the information. And again, this is our customers, and we are checking their income is the income of the previous year for our customers. On this occasion, these are normal columns. They are just a normal data bar. You do the same measure, you copy the measures, and the conditional formatting, bars, okay, only bars, no values, okay, and you just put it nicely. Here they are. These are no SVGs. And then you have some more information in the way of three different visuals. Again, this is SVG by Andres. These are visual, zoom chart visuals, okay, giving different information. These are the statements. This is the analysis in visuals. Okay, I want to understand those that have not actually yet produced the report. Remember, the important stuff is this, this, and this. Everything else is accompanying the information. Okay, that is accompanying the information. That is some KPIs. I think that you can add it, but if you added the KPIs and take these two visuals and only do a massive matrix, you are okay in the positive and in the right. Okay, remember it's financial statements. Okay, it's not a normal simple analysis. Um, if you have any question or you want to ask Andres, is somewhere there in the chat. You can connect with him and drive him crazy. He will tell me tomorrow how many connection and question he has. Um, Apart from that, David, I am basically done. At least there is anything
All right.
else. Yeah, can you get rid of me here?
All right. Let me move my screens. Do, 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 do. Let's go here. Yeah, I think I'm showing the right one. So once this goes live, there we go. Unlike Federico's report, which was nice and clean and polished, right? This is what I wanted to show you as well. Because me and Federico were just talking before the workshop as well, right? What you usually see is in the top five announcements already built in webinar, already built in visuals, how they're looking, everything is styled and everything. On our sessions, I usually already have something pre built and everything. But what I realized today is we never really showcase to you how things are looking during the process, right? And I think it's one of the things that people kind of overlook and they think that everything always needs to be very tidy, very clean, and everything, right? That's absolutely not the case. When you're creating your report, be as hectic as you want it to be, as long as it makes sense to you. Because the primary thing when you're starting to build a report is just checking if your measures are showing the correct values, if they're acting the way that you're wanting them to act. Do they cross filter the information? Do they cross filter the information correctly? And so forth. So when I was starting to build it, right, basically what I did initially is I just created three KPIs because those are the three things that I wanted to focus on primarily. I wanted to see the total revenue, the total expenses, and what's the overall difference between them. So just to understand whether I'm in the green or the red overall, right? Then I had a timeline, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, a waterfall, and then these different measures where I started to think about, okay, what else I could start to analyze, right? And one of the things that's also in the brief is comparing the values versus the budget, right? So you have something already budgeted, and then you have the actual numbers. So comparing the difference between them is a completely different dimension that you can go for. The one thing though that I want to emphasize this, whenever you do this, or whenever you're comparing the expenses, whether it's the previous year, whether it's the budget itself, think about the logical aspect of things. Now, what I mean about this is if I'm decreasing the expenses, it is a good thing. It is not a good thing to increase the expenses, right? So just think about the logical aspect of it because we're very used to just seeing it's a positive number, that's great. In expenses, it's vice versa, right? If I lower my expenses, that's a good thing. So just think about when you're going to be applying some conditional formatting, when some sentiment analysis, or anything that's regarding these categories. Make sure you do it properly. Because if you do it incorrectly, that's going to break the whole sort of approach and the whole feeling about the report, right? It's going to be like, yeah, yeah, but I know this, and now this is just following me through. The first impression matters. So that's why you need to keep very keen attention to these little details. But yeah, so basically what I did is total revenue expenses difference. As you can see, I did the same for the budget. Then I just started to calculate the difference between them and the percentage increase or decrease based on the revenue itself and the expenses itself. Now, what I also noticed when I started to create a model, because basically when you're going to add the data by default, you're going to have only these three tables. So that's going to be your initial model. Then afterwards, you somehow need to connect it. So I created also a date calendar and I created a connection going both ways. The reason why I wanted to do this is because if I wouldn't have connected it basically in a circle of dependency here, I wouldn't be able to cross filter the information from any visual to any visual, right? It would just follow one direction specifically. What I wanted to be able to achieve is the following. So if I look at the overall situation, this is the overall number, right? If I'm looking at the actual numbers, unfortunately, I'm almost 1.5 million in minus. Happens. Not
Yeah.
the greatest. You never know. Maybe I'm reinvesting everything, right? That's why I'm in the minuses. So, but if I compare it actually versus the budget, the revenue is increased from what I initially thought, and I have lowered my expenses. So, from that point of view, I'm actually doing good, right? It's the actual number currently that's I maybe should be concerned about, but that's another deeper analysis that you can start to go into. So, what I wanted to be able to do after this is that the user is able to just select whatever time period he wants, and these numbers, everything is adjusting correctly, right? It's not just going one direction, because initially, if you just create a single direction, let's say to the transactions or the budget, well, one number or the other is going to change, but you need to make sure that everything changes simultaneously. Because you can't really compare, let's say the total budget versus just half of the actual income. You can't do that. You need to make sure that the periods in comparison are exactly the same. So that's why in the model you need to play around with the relationships. And I think this is going to be a great challenge for that point of view that the model that we have given you is good for basic analysis, but once you start to go into the matrix that you saw from Federico, from what I'm doing right here, you will start to understand, okay, there's something missing and I need to do something. And this is what we wanted you to kind of play around with and just sort of have the fight with the data a little bit more, right? It's fun to have simple data sets, but we also need to challenge you from time to time. And this is what we're trying to do this time. So, for the timeline, essentially what I'm just describing here is like Federico mentioned, right? In the financial statements at the very end, you want to have that matrix table that just clearly states to you. What I wanted to do with the approach that I've done here is before you go into that statement analysis, I wanted to just have a page where I have a complete overview of just overall situation. How are my incomes versus expenses going on? What are the splits and so forth? So, in order to do that, I did a couple of things for the timeline. For the timeline, I'm actually using three different series, and you can see them in the tooltip as well. You have the total expenses, you have the total revenue, and you have the difference. Now, the way I created this is if I start to do this from scratch, let's go ahead and just zoom in a little bit more to the page. Um, let's go ahead. That's a pilot chart. There we go. So, what I did is, of course, I need a date, right? That's why I have the date table. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I need some revenue or expenses. First process or thought that I had was, hey, I could just use theoretically just the amount, and then I have the revenue versus expenses, and I could use this as a legend. You can easily do that. But the problem here is that in order to do some conditional formatting, you need to somehow reference only one section of this, right? Which
Correct.
isn't really possible. So the only way in how you can do that is you need to create those separate measures. And calculate is a great function for that. So you can just say, hey, I want to sum up the amount where the expenses or the revenue segment is expenses, and then the other one, it's the revenue, right? That's one way in how you can split them separately. So that's what I did next. I understood that this approach isn't going to allow me to achieve what I wanted. So legends be gone, sum be gone. Now I'm going to have two different values. Visually, it looks exactly the same as it did before. It's the same idea behind it. Okay, so what do I do next? Next is I want to make sure that one of the primary questions that we had in a brief was, for example, I want to highlight the periods of time where my expenses were actually higher than the income. Okay, means some sort of conditional formatting. So series one is my sum of amount. Sometimes it just Power BI loves to cache stuff. Don't forget about it. See, suddenly it's total revenue. Things happen. But you can see, okay, that's the revenue. That's the number that I want to compare. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to enable conditional formatting. By default, it's just taking some average number from the series, which is not what I want to do in this case. I actually want to switch this to compare it against another series. And the series that I'm comparing it against is series
So
2. So basically, whenever this column is lower than this, it's going to be in red, meaning that I have higher expenses than I have money coming in. So I'm losing money in that time of period. Okay, cool. Having them side by side, I could theoretically do this. What we usually do, right? You've seen me done this about 100 times at this point, right? I could do something like this. I could say, okay, I'm going to be using series defaults. I'm going to actually stack them. Instead of normal stack, because this makes absolutely zero sense, I would be using zero-based stack, right? And for the revenue, instead of having the whole column, I'm going to customize it and say only use it like 50%. Okay. And you've seen me do this before, right? This setup. So I was like, okay, I actually want to play around with this a bit more and do something different this time. So instead of adjusting the width percent, I did a different approach. I kept it at 100, but instead of playing around with the fill colors and the sizes of things, I actually went ahead and said that fill color is going to be 0, so it's fully transparent. And I actually want to add an outline, but the outline, I want to make it as something just simple, so something like black, for example. So theoretically, what I'm saying now is, hey, this is the box that needs to be filled with my revenue, right? So I'm setting the target for it. And then, of course, it's just playing around with some of the values. Like, for example, right now, the red ends up exactly underneath the column. So if you wanted to have a little bit of space in between them, go for the total revenue, series 1. Say that you want to customize it and say it's maybe like 95%. Just play around with them, right? The visuals are your playing ground. So you're more than welcome to just play around, see what you can achieve with this. So it's one of the things that I did in this approach. And the reason why it helps me is because even if I decide to go, for example, for 2024, you can see on a quarterly level, the first quarter is below. On a monthly level, these are the months where I'm down. If I start to move around the chart, we can see, okay, there's actually a whole period when my expenses were higher. So the user can play around with different setups. The one thing though that I noticed is if I go for the full approach, where I have all the data, and if I go to, or even let's go to 1 year, and if I switch to days, you can see only have 1 day basically per month, right? So going to this level isn't necessary. So remove those levels from the hierarchy. Do not allow your user to basically get stuck on something just because you didn't want to remove it initially. Because right now, if I click on month, that's the last level. I can't really split it any lower, right? So always think about which units are okay, which ones you want to keep. Same as, for example, if you don't want a quarters, you can either remove it for the hierarchy, that's one way, or the other one is through the formatting options. In the formatting options, you can open up display unit and say, hey, I want to keep it in the hierarchy, but I don't want the user to be able to get to it. So this is another way on how you can control it. Reason why this is sometimes better than removing it from the hierarchy completely is because next time if I decide that, hey, actually I want to have that day now because I have a little bit more data now and I have a more granular, I can just go into the formatting options and enable it rather than going through the data model, adding the hierarchy again, double checking if everything's correctly and so forth. I already have it pre-built, right? So it's just a few minor adjustments in that sense. So that's one thing. What else? Another thing that I wanted to understand is what is going to be the difference, right? So, okay, I see that I'm doing better, I'm doing worse, but how much am I actually missing or how much above the goal am I? Again, a very simple calculation. You just subtract from one from the other. There's no rocket science there, guys. For basic calculations, there's no rocket science. So, difference, I'm going to add it as a third series. And this is where things start to get interesting in a sense that visually, this doesn't look very good, right? You can all agree with me. This just looks weird. You have some columns going up there, red, down below. So I need to figure out a way on how I can hide this. So one way on how I could do this is I could say that, hey, I want to customize this series again individually. Then I'm going to go ahead and say that instead of columns, I'm going to change it to lines. Now, the reason why I want to change it to lines is because columns usually love to stack and somehow affect other values. Lines are usually on a completely different, basically, layer, right? So it's not going to be affecting so much the values. The other thing is the line itself, I don't really care about. What I want to see is the value in the tooltip. I basically want to reference it. So I could just add it to the tooltip, for example, content, but this is again another thing that you can play around with. I added it, completely made it invisible. Then I'm going to assign it to a secondary axis. The reason why I want to assign it to a secondary axis is because a primary axis already has a scale. I don't want to mess this scale. So I assign it to a secondary axis. And since that's the only value on a secondary axis, once I enable it, you can see that this is where the zero line basically is. So everything is the same within the same canvas. So I don't really need it. Like I said, I only want it for the reference. Okay, I have all these three metrics. Now, if I look at the tooltip, it just looks a bit messy. There's something orange, something red, something green. Things are just floating all around, right? So the next part is, okay, I want to make sure that the tooltip is being showcased correctly and I can understand what is what. So what I did is for the third series, which is the difference, I want to make sure that I'm applying the same conditional formatting logic. But here, I'm going to say that instead of referencing another series, I'm just going to reference a constant value. So if my difference is above zero, it's a good thing. If it's below zero, it's a bad thing, right? So I'm referencing a zero as the starting point. And I'm keeping it dynamically changing colors in the tooltip so that I get effect that if it's in the green, you can highlight it very quickly. Okay. Now for series two, or actually series one, which was the revenue, we do have the same principle where it changes. You can see total revenue, see? It's switching from red to green as well. I don't want that. I only want that to be for the difference. So right here you have a property where you can say that even though the columns are changing, the color in the tooltips are not going to be affected. So now when I move between them, you can see it's always yellow because it's taking the default color of the series. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead here, actually disable conditional formatting for a second, fill color, change it to black, and re-enable conditional formatting so that it's always in black color. That's my fallback color. And the same goes for series 2. I also don't want it to be some sort of orange, which isn't really visible anywhere. So I can go ahead and say that, hey, where is it? Fill color, also black. So now, if the user only focuses on the tooltip itself, it's a lot clearer to understand whether it's good or bad. Which means that if they don't like the conditional for coloring on the chart itself, they can at least keep some aspect of it in the tooltip, right? So they can play around with these different values. So that's one part of it. Now, what else? If we go to the main page that I had here, zoom out a bit, the other chart that I created here was a waterfall. So whenever you're going to be looking at different financial statements or financial analysis, waterfall is going to be one of the charts that's just going to be popping up everywhere. It's a simple visual, but you have to understand how to use it also to make the best out of it, right? So one of the things that I wanted to showcase here is, okay, this is my timeline on overall expenses and revenue. What I want to see here is how it's being split into those different expenses or revenue categories. So what we had in the accounts table, we had level 1 and level 2. So these are actually categories and subcategories of those segments. So what this allows me now to do is basically I can say that, okay, I actually want to see how the operating expenses are looking overall at the time period that I have here. So I can click on it, drill down to additional expense units. Sure, I don't have the conditional formatting anymore. That's because at this point I don't have those income statements anymore. This is just focusing on the expenses, right? But I can see any, for example, any part or any category, subcategory on the timeline and see, for example, okay, where are some spikes, where are the increases, and so forth. So it's one of the approaches where these charts Separately, they give you value, but they give you most of the value when you start to work with them simultaneously. Because you can say, hey, I see there's a lot of red here. Fine. I want to investigate this time period a little bit closer. Okay. I can see that income is going to be 10 million. The expense is the highest expense is going to be the operating expenses. Which part of it? Drill down. That's the payroll. Okay. So maybe we can play around with the pay a bit more. And this is what happens usually in financial statements as well. You usually have a page where you start to play around with so-called if analysis. So what happens if we lower, for example, the pay by 5% to everyone, right? We have budget cuts, so we're going to lower everyone's expenses by 5%, not expenses, but pay by 5%. You have another slider that affects this and so forth. And you start to kind of try to see, okay, when are things starting to look better overall? Do we need to make drastic changes, or are those only smaller changes? What can we affect? The only thing about the what if analysis that I would highly recommend you to always think about is always use your critical thinking and don't start changing things that you cannot physically affect, right? Only do some what if for things that are, it's something that the company can actually affect, right? If there's things like income tax, well, you can't magically say that, well, last year it was 20%, now it's going to be 15%. You don't control it. It is what it is.
Finger crossed they
Oh yeah,
change.
fingers crossed we could do that, but but just don't, create these analyses for things that cannot physically be changed by the company in real life scenarios. I think that we also had a question like what's going to be the income tax for the data set. I'd say for this case, you can basically choose whatever income tax you want to utilize. We don't have defined what country this is, so use some sort of average, I don't know, 10, 15%, something like
Yes, and
that.
that your country. I use
Yeah,
euros
or
in
use your
mine.
own
You
country
can use
ones.
dollar. Therefore, you use a different tax system. That is outside the scope of what we try to do. Is just to create a financial statement. Your country, your tax, and your currency.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's no limitation to that side. The one thing you have to remember, right? These challenges are about you learning something new and playing around with the data set that we give you. So there's not going to be any. I'd say these would be silly restrictions where we would say do this specifically like this and that, because if somebody's from a different country, the tax system might be a little bit different, so they get confused. No, you can operate in your own regional sort of local rules and guidelines and everything. So that's completely fine. Or if you don't want to do it, just apply an average of X amount of percentage for everything, and that's going to be fine. So yeah, that's one part of it. And start to play around with the cross filtering, because like I said, without proper relationships and proper model itself, this wouldn't be the final model. No, this is just for what I've built so far. And this is how models usually are also generated in a lot of cases. You kind of create a model which seems to be okay, but then when you start to do some additional analysis, you're like, I'm kind of missing something. So now I need to figure out how do I change this, right?
Yes, I
So,
think, as I mentioned, financial data is not easy to model and to work with because they have all these categories, subcategories, and more subcategories if they want to. And to put all that together is kind of a little bit of a hassle.
oh, absolutely, yeah. So that's one thing. What else? Whenever you're, for example, calculating also the numbers and everything, make sure you calculate them with a sense of logic, I would say. What I mean by is, for example, total this was fine for the difference as well. For the change, for example, yeah, this was one of the tricky parts initially, it seems like, right? If we look at the data set itself, let's see what I'm using here as a base. So I'm using the accounts table. Okay. If we go for the accounts, you can see all the numbers are going to be in positive, right? There's different accounts, different segments, and so forth. If we go for transactions as well, the amount is always going to be positive, regardless whether it's expense or revenue, which is fine because, in a sense, you can also calculate things with absolute values. But if you want to showcase it in things like Waterfall, there has to be positive and negative impact.
Mm.
Because otherwise, well, it's going to look like this, right? If I change this just to amount, This makes again makes absolutely no sense because you can't really sum up together money that's coming in and out, right? You have to separate them. So what I did for the change, you can see, okay, I'm using a switch function, but this could have easily been done just with an if statement as well. I'm using the same measures that I used before, but there's just one slight difference. I just added a minus before it. If it's an expense, I want the value to be negative, and that's it, right?
Yeah,
You could also create, of course, a separate measure for it, but in my case, I'm just using what I already have and just adjusting it based on the scenario. So for this visual, I need those negative numbers. So just gonna add a minus to it. In real life scenarios as well, one thing that I can account sort of recommend is do not forget how useful can the absolute function be. So absolute just converts any positive or negative number into a positive number, right? Because if you're putting it in some sort of visuals, you can always mix positive and negative numbers. For example, in Federico's report as well, you saw there was a donut with revenue and expenses. You wouldn't be able to do it if you would have positive and negative numbers because you can't really create a donut based on that.
correct. Correct.
So, since everything is an absolute value, you can do that. But in real life scenarios, you have to think about the values. So,
Guys,
yeah, go ahead.
please fill out the form. There is a free book from back to be given. By filling out the form, we know how are we doing, and so we can do better. So please fill out the form. And if you fill out the form, you have a 5% more chance of winning the challenge.
Yes. And if you fill it in within the first 5 minutes of when we're posting this, there's a 7.5%
10%.
chance. No, 10. Okay, so we can increase
10%. If
it.
you do it now, 10%.
No, but seriously, guys, it just helps us to understand whether what we're doing here is what you came for, right? If we need to change something, if you want to see something new, it just helps us to prepare better for the next session. Uh, but yeah, the main thing that I wanted just to showcase is whenever you're creating something, don't be kind of worried about how it looks initially. Trust me, some of the reports when you're just building them, they look like a complete mess. That's because you're just trying to understand things. Most of the times, I can tell you straight away, I usually have like duplicates of pages. In some pages, I just have a random table where I'm throwing in some categories, trying to understand if these calculations are calculating everything correctly and so forth. Afterwards, of course, I delete them. But when I'm doing this, they serve the purpose of checking, right? Because sometimes when you just have a lot of numbers, it's kind of hard to just orientate based on the KPI cards. Sometimes you need that row level context on the table to understand if things are being shown correctly. So yeah, no, I'm gonna put change back. Um, what else? Since it is a financial statement, in a lot of financial statements, you have a logic on how things are ordered. I haven't done this on this one. I just went with the approach this is how much we earned, this is how we are spending that money, and this is what we're left with. However, Waterfall has a field called sequence where you can define a custom sequence for every location of the column. So you can also utilize that to specifically define where things are located and how they are ordered, right? So play around with that one as well, I would say. For the challenge in general, I'd say a timeline, waterfall, donut, and combo would probably be the most sufficient visuals. Rest of them you can of course play around with, maybe a little bit of scatter plot, but for very specific cases.
No, but I think line chart you work with time, and not even that because you are not looking at variation. You are looking at what you do every month. It's a column chart can be done quite okay, I think the waterfall is a must. It's
Yeah,
finance. You have to give the guys of finance, the finance guy, a waterfall. Otherwise, they will complain.
yeah, it's the same as at one point it doesn't matter how big the table is, there has to be a table.
A table, yes,
If
and
there
the
isn't one, there's going to be like, yeah, it's not a full financial analysis, it's just
yeah,
more like an overview.
yes.
All right, just to be cautious about the time, I also wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions just to make sure we covered those. So do we have any questions?
Okay, let's talk about, yeah, guys. We had today, or Sunja have today, different webinar tools, best settings. We try everything.
Yeah.
unfortunately, the most we try to do, and it doesn't work. So we need to balance what we can give you and what is there for us to give to you to be 100% perfect. So you have to put up with the inconveniences sometimes. But I can tell you that every day there are new different check or every week, essentially checking from different setting and how make sure everything is okay. Jeremy asked if I can provide a screenshot of my report. Jeremy, if you don't mind, please send me a private message in LinkedIn and I will send that to you. Nonetheless, at some point, Andres will present because Andres is going to present that in the challenge. Okay? We cannot win, guys. Don't be afraid. We can win. Okay? It will be unfair because I will be voting for myself. Okay, but you will be able to see the report on LinkedIn and live. Okay, very soon too. But yes, Jeremy, send me a message and I pass that screenshot to you.
Gokula said, it is quite tough for me to determine the KPI and I'm having a lot of trouble with DAX queries. Could you please help me understand this? I'd say the first thing that you want to do is if you don't know exactly what you want to analyze or where to start, where to begin, always make sure you go and read the brief of the challenge. Because in the brief, we tell you some of the things that we think could be beneficial for you to analyze. So, for example, over the year, did the company spend more or less than planned? So, which means I need to create, for example, a chart that has the budget and it has the actual expenses, for example. Just comparing those two. KPI, simple. Planned, actual, difference, right? That's one view. You don't necessarily have to know what exactly you're going for straight away. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you start to play around with different charts and then sort of you think about a story that you want to present there. Because you can combine this, right? What was the company profitable each month, or did expenses exceed income at any point? These are two different charts. You could also create, for example, a field parameter to switch between the value categories and so forth. So I'd say choose, for example, one group and try to answer those three questions. If you can, see if you can make a story out of it. If not, go for another one. If you don't succeed at first time, well, welcome to Power BI and world of data analysis. You, sometimes you don't
Yes,
get things right straight away.
Gokula, you are starting. Just go easy. Go on those KPIs that you can show. Okay, and try to do the best you can. There is no obligation for you at the moment to produce difficult DAX or difficult KPIs, okay, because you are just starting your road. Okay, so I can tell you that some of the DAX that Andres produced is complicated. Okay, so let's not just dwell into, oh, I cannot do that. Okay, I cannot do that, but can I do that? Yeah, but let me do this. Okay, and keep improving.
Absolutely. Like what you saw in the DAX formula where the SVG was being created, right? That's not something we expect from a first time participant. If you can do it, kudos to you, but that's not something we expect from you. You can create good reports also with simple DAX.
Yes.
I have a question from Ebit to net income. Do we consider, yeah, this was the one. Do we consider the income tax? And if yes, what is the average percent to calculate income tax? Like we said, you can base it on your region, or you can just go ahead and use some sort of an average, let's say 10 or 15. It doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, we're just going to be looking at the data regardless of how it looks like, how it feels, how to report, can I find the insights, and so forth. So the income tax and everything would change from territory to territory regardless.
I think Con, you can just do a check about this question in Google's, and you can implement it into the report, the better. Okay, don't get too crazy about it. Okay, remember it's a competition. You're not gonna, your boy is not gonna get you a salary increase because of that.
I mean, you never know, but
Yeah, hey, who knows?
this SVG looks beautiful, but when working with large data sets such as 2 or 3 million rows, it may.
Mm, I think, I mean, Andres said that okay, but if you do it properly, you also avoid all the other measures that actually give more weight to the data set. I think 2 to 3 million, depending of the DAX and the SVG, might not present a lot of problem. It can, but definitely 100% that of course SVG measures weight more than normal measures. So there is always a price to pay for them, always. Okay, if for you to find the balance, do I use the SVG now? Uh, Andres decided to go ahead with the SVG because we don't have a 2 or 3 million rows, okay, data set. So if you don't have a 2 3 million row data set, I think you can go ahead. If you have a up to 5 million, 10 million data set, uh, don't use it. Remember, some of these columns can also be recreated with a copy of the measure and conditional formatting. Okay, the good thing at the SVG is that actually work the bars in a different way, and you can see that they are not straight down. Okay, they move right to right in a different way. And but Sumit, it's very simple. I am not one of the person that like to use SVGs. Uh, I need to know how to use it. I need to learn how to use it. But then whether do I apply it or not, it's up to me. Is that too heavy for my report? I don't use it. It's not heavy. I'm going to use it. But let us learn how to do it, how to work it out because they look good.
Yeah.
Maybe
The one thing you just have to remember, I think, always is there's a trade off between every single choice you do within a report. It doesn't matter. Even if you do the same thing with a visual that's maybe a custom visual available in the app stores, that also might affect the performance. You could use the native visuals, which cannot achieve what you're looking for. You can kind of get close, but it's a little bit better, for example, performance. So you always have to play around with what you have and see which trade off you're willing to basically do, because it's going to
correct.
be the same even if you use just a regular table. For example, there might be cases where a table is fine, there might be cases where you use exactly the same table, but just the data model behind the scenes is too complex, there's too many relationships being involved, and the same thing just feels clunky and unable to be used. Sometimes what you can always do, it all depends on the situation of course, is but if you have those massive data sets and you feel that a lot of calculations are just getting intertwined and you're getting a lot of performance, or for example, hits, is you create a completely separate page which basically uses a summarized version already of the data. And then instead of
Yeah.
2 3 million rows, you have a predefined set of rows and values which are working
And
just
use
fine.
that table, that aggregation table. That is a
Yeah,
fantastic
there's
solution. That is a
different things
fantastic.
that you
That
can
is a
use.
fantastic solution. Actually, that's great. Actually, I'm gonna write that down because sometimes you forget about them. This
Yeah, yeah.
aggregation table. You say, okay, I can get actually this aggregated, grouped by whatever, and from 3 millions I go to 100,000 rows or something like that, and then
Yeah,
it's,
because
it's, it's a lot better.
it's important for where you want to have that dynamic interaction and everything. But there are cases where things are relatively static, right? And you're fine with it. So just create an aggregated table and show that. That's fine.
Okay, I want to say one more thing, and I have to
Go
go
ahead.
at 3 o'clock because I go a meeting, work meeting after this. That if you have any more question, please, you can go to the Zoom chat team. You can go to our challenges group and place the question there. Please do not kill Andre with too many private messages. He cannot reply to everybody. We prefer you to actually put the question in the challenges group, and one of us will reply to you with no problem.
And also think about it like this, right? If you ask it in personal, it means that only you get the answer. The same answer might be usable for a lot of you.
for a number of people. Correct.
Exactly. So sharing is caring. All right. I think
So
for once, Federico, can you imagine we actually managed to finish right on
no,
time?
no. Let's stay 1 more minute,
One more?
just for
Okay.
the
Just
yeah.
for the
We
good
need
old
to
time.
break it. We cannot be on time. We cannot be
No,
on
no.
time, guys. As I told you, I got a copy, okay, of an empty data set with the data modeling. It's just if you want to, please ask for it. Um, give it a go. It's that simple. And
Yeah.
now we are over 1 minute. I think we can say goodbye now.
Yeah. So hope it was interesting and useful, and we'll see you in the top five announcement.
Okay, thank you guys. Bye bye now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.